This isn't a charity bank, sweetheart. Check cashing place is 3 blocks down on Ashland. Douglas Whitfield's voice carried across the marble lobby of Meridian Bank with deliberate volume, ensuring every customer could hear his dismissal. To him, the black woman in the worn jeans and faded Northwestern hoodie was just another person looking for handouts, not someone who belonged in a branch that catered to Chicago's elite. He didn't see the exhaustion in her bloodshot eyes from a red-eye flight, or the quiet authority beneath her disheveled appearance, or the surgical precision in hands that had saved hundreds of lives. As security guards flanked Dr. Amara Williams and escorted her toward the glass doors, Douglas smirked with satisfaction, unaware that the woman he just humiliated was not only a client, but sat on the bank's board of directors and controlled a portfolio worth $38 million. By noon, his 32-year career would be over, his pension in jeopardy, and his certainty about who belonged in his bank shattered beyond repair. Before we continue, comment where in the world you're watching from, and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Meridian Bank's downtown Chicago branch, casting geometric patterns across imported Italian marble floors. The lobby hummed with quiet efficiency, the soft clicking of keyboards, the rustle of financial documents, hushed conversations about investment portfolios and wire transfers. Crystal chandeliers hung from the vaulted ceiling, and leather chairs were arranged around polished mahogany tables. Everything about the space screamed exclusivity, from the abstract art on the walls to the discreet premier banking signs directing high-net-worth clients to private offices. Dr. Amara Williams pushed through the heavy brass doors at 9:47 a.m., her body heavy with exhaustion. She'd spent the last 29 hours in transit, a medical conference in Geneva that had run late, a missed connection in London, a cramped middle seat on the overnight flight to O'Hare. Her carry-on had been lost somewhere over the Atlantic. All she had were the clothes on her back, faded jeans, her old Northwestern medical school hoodie with a coffee stain on the sleeve, and scuffed sneakers. Her natural hair was pulled into a messy bun, several coils escaping to frame her face. No makeup, no jewelry, except the simple watch her father had given her when she finished her residency. She needed to access her accounts to pay a contractor who was waiting at her house for a check, a time-sensitive repair that couldn't wait until she'd had a chance to shower and change. Just a simple transaction, in and out, then home to sleep for 12 hours. The cool air-conditioned atmosphere of the bank felt jarring after the muggy Chicago summer morning. Amara approached the queue management system and took a ticket, B47. She found a seat in the waiting area, her body sinking into the leather chair with relief. Her head throbbed with jet lag, and her mouth tasted stale from airplane air and too much coffee. From his position near the teller stations, branch manager Douglas Whitfield noticed her immediately. His eyes narrowed as he took in her appearance. The worn clothing, the disheveled hair, the way she seemed to be trying to make herself comfortable in the waiting area. 32 years in banking had taught him to spot people who didn't belong, and this woman set off every alarm bell he'd carefully calibrated over decades of protecting his branch. Douglas prided himself on maintaining standards. This branch served some of Chicago's wealthiest families, tech executives, real estate moguls, old money that had been banking with Meridian for generations. It wasn't the kind of place where just anyone could walk in off the street. He'd built his reputation on discretion, on understanding the unspoken rules about who warranted white glove service and who needed to be redirected. He watched as Amara shifted in her chair, as she rubbed her temples, as she checked her phone with obvious fatigue. The hoodie bothered him, the sneakers bothered him, but more than that, her very presence in this space bothered him. She looked out of place, uncomfortable, like she was trying to work up the courage to ask for something she had no right to request. Douglas straightened his tie and began walking toward her, his Italian leather shoes clicking purposefully against the marble. He'd done this dozens of times before, the polite but firm redirection, the suggestion that perhaps she'd be more comfortable at a different branch, the subtle indication that some spaces weren't meant for everyone. Usually people left without much fuss. The key was to project authority, to make them feel like they'd made a mistake just by walking through the door. "Excuse me," Douglas said as he reached her, his voice pitched to carry to the nearby customers. "Can I help you with something?" Amara looked up, seeing the name tag, Douglas Whitfield, branch manager, and the expression on his face that was already making judgments. She'd seen that look before, countless times in her 41 years. The look that assessed, measured, and found her lacking before she'd spoken a single word. "I'm waiting for a teller," Amara said quietly, her voice rough with exhaustion. "I have a transaction to complete." Douglas's eyes flicked to her ticket, B47, then back to her appearance. His jaw tightened. "I see. And do you have an account with us?" The question hung in the air, weighted with doubt and disbelief. Amara felt the familiar tightness in her chest, the exhaustion of having to prove herself in spaces that should be accessible to everyone. "Yes, I do. I've been a customer for 8 years. "Really?" The single word dripped with skepticism. Douglas crossed his arms, his body language broadcasting his disbelief to everyone watching. "This branch specifically, because I make it my business to know our regular clients, and I don't recognize you." Amara's hands tightened on her phone. Her head pounded, her body ached, and she was too tired for this. "I don't usually come in person. I handle most of my banking online or through my financial advisor. But I need to access my account today for a time-sensitive payment." "Uh-huh." Douglas's lip curled slightly. "Well, without proper identification and proof of account ownership, I'm afraid I can't allow you to conduct any transactions. This branch has strict security protocols. Premier clientele, you understand." "I have my driver's license," Amara said, reaching into her hoodie pocket, "and I can access my account information through the app." "This isn't a social services office, sweetheart," Douglas interrupted, his voice rising just enough to ensure nearby customers could hear. "If you're looking for assistance with banking services, there are community banks and credit unions that would be more appropriate for your situation. This branch serves high net worth individuals exclusively." The condescension in his tone was unmistakable. Several customers had stopped what they were doing, turning to watch the interaction. Amara felt heat rising to her face, not from embarrassment, but from the familiar burn of anger she'd learned to control, to channel, to push down deep where it couldn't be used against her. "I am a high net worth individual," Amara said, her voice tight but controlled. "I have multiple accounts here, including checking, savings, and investment portfolios. My advisor is Helen Martinez. You can call her to verify." Douglas's expression hardened. The audacity of this woman, lying so blatantly, refusing to just leave quietly. "Ma'am, I'm going to ask you once more to provide legitimate proof of account ownership. Or I'll have to ask you to leave the premises. We've had issues with people attempting to commit fraud, and your behavior is checking a lot of concerning boxes." "My behavior?" Amara's voice cracked slightly, exhaustion and frustration bleeding through. "I'm sitting in a chair waiting my turn. What exactly about my behavior is concerning?" "Your presence is making other customers uncomfortable," Douglas said flatly, gesturing to the lobby. "This is a place of business, not a shelter. And frankly, you don't look like someone who belongs here. Now, there's a check cashing place 3 blocks down on Ashland. They can probably help you with whatever you need." The words landed like slaps. Amara felt the eyes of everyone in the lobby on her now. The other customers, the tellers behind their windows, the security guards by the entrance. She was being profiled, dismissed, humiliated, all because she'd made the mistake of coming to her own bank while tired and wearing casual clothes. "I'm not leaving," Amara said quietly, but with a firmness that made Douglas's jaw clench. "I'm a customer. I have every right to be here. That's it." Douglas's voice turned sharp, authoritative. He turned toward the 2 security guards stationed near the entrance. "Marcus, Steve, please escort this woman out of the building. She's trespassing and refusing to leave when asked." "Wait." Amara started to stand, her legs shaky from exhaustion. "You can't. This is discrimination. You're targeting me because of how I look, because—" "Don't play that card with me," Douglas snapped, his voice loud enough to echo off the marble walls. "I've been in banking for 32 years. I know what I'm doing. This has nothing to do with your race and everything to do with the fact that you're clearly not a customer, you're wasting our time, and you're disturbing legitimate clients who actually belong here." The 2 security guards approached, their expressions uncomfortable but obedient. They were both younger men, Marcus, a black man in his late 20s, and Steve, a white man in his early 30s. Amara could see the uncertainty in Marcus's eyes, the way he hesitated before reaching for her arm. "Ma'am, we need you to come with us," Marcus said quietly, apologetically. "Don't touch me," Amara said, trying to maintain some dignity even as her vision blurred with exhaustion and unshed tears of frustration. "I can walk myself out." But Douglas wasn't satisfied with a quiet exit. "No, escort her out properly. I want to make sure she understands she's not welcome back here unless she can provide proper documentation and proof she's actually a customer, which I highly doubt." Steve reached for Amara's other arm. Their grips were firm, professional, but insistent. Amara tried to pull away, to maintain control of her own body, but her legs were weak from 29 hours of travel. She stumbled slightly, and they caught her, their hands tightening. "Stop! Let me get my bag." Amara tried to reach for her purse, which had fallen to the floor, but they were already moving her toward the entrance. Her phone slipped from her pocket, clattering against the marble with a sharp crack. The screen shattered. "My phone!" "You can pick it up outside," Douglas said coldly, following behind them. He made a show of brushing his hands together, as if removing dirt. "And don't come back without proper identification. Preferably don't come back at all. We have standards here." Other customers in the lobby watched in uncomfortable silence. Some looked away quickly. Others stared openly, their expressions ranging from shock to approval to carefully maintain neutrality. One woman actually nodded at Douglas, as if thanking him for removing an unsavory element. No one spoke up. No one questioned whether this was right, whether this level of aggression was warranted for a tired woman sitting in a chair. Amara felt her feet dragging across the polished marble, felt the hands gripping her arms hard enough to leave bruises, felt the absolute humiliation of being physically removed from a bank where she held more money than most of these witnesses would earn in their lifetimes. Through the fog of exhaustion and anger, she caught one last glimpse of Douglas Whitfield's face, that satisfied smirk, that self-righteous certainty that he'd done the right thing, protected his precious branch from someone who didn't belong. The morning sunshine felt harsh and accusatory as the security guards released her arms on the sidewalk outside the entrance. The automatic glass doors slid shut behind her, with a soft whoosh sealing her out. Steve went back inside immediately, not meeting her eyes. Marcus hesitated, his expression troubled. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, so softly she almost didn't hear it. I hope you understand. I was just following orders." Then he too disappeared back into the bank, leaving Amara alone on the sidewalk, her shattered phone on the ground beside her bag, her arms aching where they'd gripped her, her chest tight with the familiar exhaustion of being judged, dismissed, and discarded. She stood there for a long moment, watching through the glass as Douglas Whitfield returned to his position, straightened his tie, and resumed his morning as if nothing significant had happened, as if he hadn't just humiliated a human being, as if his assumptions and prejudices were justified, even righteous. Amara's hands trembled as she picked up her phone and bag. The screen was destroyed, spiderwebbed with cracks. She pressed the power button, but it was dead. Her connection to her financial app, her contacts, her ability to call anyone, gone. The morning traffic rushed past on the street behind her. The city continued its rhythm, indifferent to her humiliation. She needed to get home, needed to find a way to pay the contractor, needed to file a complaint, needed to make sure this never happened to anyone else. But first, she needed to sit down before her legs gave out completely. There was a coffee shop 2 doors down. Amara walked slowly toward it, her body moving on autopilot while her mind spun with exhaustion and fury, and that bone-deep weariness of fighting the same battle over and over again. Inside the coffee shop, the barista took one look at her face and poured her a coffee without asking for payment. "Rough morning?" the young woman asked gently. Amara almost laughed. "You have no idea." She found a table in the back corner and collapsed into the chair, finally allowing herself to feel the full weight of what had just happened. Not the first time, not even the 10th time, but this time felt different. Because this time, she actually had the power to do something about it, and she was tired enough and angry enough to use it. She pulled out her broken phone, trying once more to get it to work. Nothing. She'd have to use the coffee shop's Wi-Fi on her laptop when she got home. She'd have to call Helen Martinez. She'd have to contact the board. She'd have to... Dr. Williams? A familiar voice cut through her spiraling thoughts. Amara looked up to see Janelle Cooper, a nurse from Northwestern Memorial, staring at her with concern. "Oh my God, what happened to you? You look like you've been through hell." And just like that, the dam broke. Not tears. Amara was too tired for tears, but words. The whole story poured out. The flight, the exhaustion, walking into her own bank, being profiled, being insulted, being physically removed like a criminal. Janelle's expression shifted from concern to outrage. "Wait, your own bank? Where you're on the board?" "He didn't know that," Amara said quietly, "and he didn't care to find out. He just saw what he saw and decided I didn't belong." "Do they know who you are?" Janelle asked. "No," Amara replied. "And that's kind of the point, isn't it? I shouldn't need to be a surgeon or a board member to be treated like a human being. Everyone who walks through those doors deserves basic dignity and respect." Janelle pulled out her phone. "I'm calling Marcus, my cousin Marcus. He works security at banks." "Wait, which branch?" "Meridian, downtown." "That's his branch," Janelle said, her fingers already flying across her screen. "He's going to want to know about this. He's been uncomfortable with how they treat people there for months." Within minutes, Janelle had Marcus on the phone. His voice was strained, guilty. "I knew something was wrong, I knew it. But Whitfield, he's been there forever, and I'm new, and God, I'm so sorry, Dr. Williams. I recognized you from when you did that surgery on my uncle last year. I should have said something." "You were put in an impossible position," Amara said, taking the phone from Janelle. "But I need you to tell me, is this a pattern? Does he do this regularly?" There was a long pause. Then, "Yes. Not always this extreme, but yes. Certain customers get different treatment. I've tried to talk to HR, but Whitfield's been there since before I was born. No one wants to challenge him." Amara's exhaustion was suddenly replaced by a cold, clear focus. "Marcus, I need you to do something for me. I need you to preserve any security footage from this morning. Can you do that?" "I can try," Marcus said. "But why?" "Because I'm not letting this go," Amara said quietly. "And because you and everyone else who's been uncomfortable with how that branch operates deserve better. Trust me." After she hung up, Janelle looked at her with something like awe. "You're really going to take them on?" "I'm really going to take them on," Amara confirmed. She borrowed Janelle's phone to call Helen Martinez, her financial advisor at Meridian. Helen answered on the first ring. "Helen Martinez. Helen, it's Amara Williams. I need you to do something for me right away." "Dr. Williams, of course, anything. What do you need?" "I need you to call every member of the Meridian Bank Board of Directors and arrange an emergency meeting for this afternoon. Tell them it's about a serious discrimination incident at the downtown branch. Tell them one of their board members was physically removed from the premises by security after being profiled and insulted by the branch manager." There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. "What? Who? Dr. Williams, are you saying this happened to you?" "This morning, less than an hour ago." "Oh my God," Helen's professional composure cracked. "Dr. Williams, I am so sorry. I don't even... Who was it? Which manager?" "Douglas Whitfield." Another pause. Then Helen's voice came back, harder now. "I'm making those calls right now. And Dr. Williams, he's done." "Not yet," Amara said. "But he will be." Amara spent the next 3 hours at Janelle's apartment, borrowing her friend's laptop and phone to start building her case. She documented everything she could remember about the incident while it was fresh, the words Douglas had used, the condescending tone, the way he'd made sure other customers could hear, the physical removal, the shattered phone. She wrote down the names of witnesses she'd seen in the lobby. She emailed Marcus about the security footage. She contacted her lawyer. By noon, Helen called back. "Emergency board meeting set for 2 p.m. at headquarters. Patricia Chen is flying in from New York. She's furious. James Morrison from compliance is pulling every complaint filed against the downtown branch for the last 5 years. And Dr. Williams? I took the liberty of informing them about your account portfolio. They nearly had a heart attack." "Good," Amara said. She felt no satisfaction, only grim determination. "This isn't about my portfolio, though. It's about how many other people have been treated this way and didn't have the resources to fight back." "I know," Helen said quietly. "That's why Patricia's flying in. This is bigger than one incident. At 1:45 p.m., Amara walked into the gleaming glass tower that housed Meridian Bank's corporate headquarters. She'd gone home to shower and change, trading the hoodie and jeans for a tailored navy suit and heels. Her hair was pulled back in a professional bun. Diamond studs glinted in her ears. She looked every inch the successful cardiac surgeon and board member she was. The receptionist's eyes widened slightly when Amara gave her name. "Dr. Williams, yes, of course. The board is waiting for you in conference room A on the 15th floor. I'm so sorry about—" "Thank you," Amara said, cutting off the apology. She didn't want apologies from people who had nothing to do with what happened. She wanted accountability from those who did. The conference room was impressive, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Chicago River, a massive mahogany table, leather chairs, abstract art that probably cost more than most people's houses. Seated around the table were the 11 members of Meridian Bank's board of directors, plus Helen Martinez, James Morrison from Compliance, and Patricia Chen, the regional director who'd apparently jumped on a private jet from New York the moment she heard. Patricia stood as Amara entered. She was a small woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and an expression of barely controlled fury. "Dr. Williams, thank you for coming. I cannot begin to express how horrified I am by what happened to you this morning." "Let's not get ahead of ourselves," Amara said, taking her seat at the table. "I want to tell you exactly what happened, and then I want to hear what the compliance investigation has found." For the next 20 minutes, Amara walked them through the entire incident. She kept her voice level, factual, but she didn't minimize the humiliation, the profiling, the physical removal. Several board members looked increasingly uncomfortable. Patricia Chen's jaw got progressively tighter. When Amara finished, James Morrison opened a thick folder. "Based on Dr. Williams's report, I initiated an immediate investigation this morning. What I found is deeply disturbing. Douglas Whitfield has been branch manager at the downtown location for 32 years. In the last 5 years alone, we've received 47 complaints about discriminatory treatment at that branch. 47. The number hung in the air like an indictment. The majority of those complaints," James continued, "were filed by people of color. They describe being questioned more aggressively than white customers, being asked for additional identification, being treated with suspicion, being made to wait longer, and in several cases, being asked to leave. Most of these complaints were dismissed at the branch level by Whitfield himself, who classified them as misunderstandings or overly sensitive customers." "Jesus Christ," one of the board members muttered. "There's more," James said grimly. "I interviewed staff at the downtown branch this afternoon. 3 tellers and both security guards confirmed that Whitfield has a pattern of treating minority customers differently. They described an environment where questioning his judgment was discouraged, where concerns about discrimination were dismissed, where the emphasis was always on protecting the branch's image and maintaining standards rather than serving all customers equally." Patricia stood, her hands flat on the table. "Where is Whitfield now?" "Still at the branch," James said. "He doesn't know about the investigation yet. He thinks this was just another day at work." "Get him here," Patricia said flatly. "Now, and I want every piece of security footage from this morning. I want witness statements. I want documentation of every single one of those 47 complaints." If this branch has been operating as a discrimination machine for years while we look the other way, we're going to answer for it. "Already done," James said, pulling up video on the large screen at the end of the room. "This is from this morning." The footage played in damning silence. There was Amara entering the bank, taking a number, sitting down exhausted in the waiting area. There was Douglas Whitfield, noticing her, his expression hardening, walking toward her with clear purpose. The video had no audio, but his body language was unmistakable, aggressive, dismissive, designed to intimidate. Then the physical removal. Even without sound, watching Amara stumble as the guards grabbed her arms, watching her phone fall and shatter, watching her be dragged toward the entrance while Douglas followed with his arms crossed. It was viscerally uncomfortable. "Turn it off," one of the board members said, her voice tight. "I've seen enough." Patricia looked at Amara. "What do you want, Dr. Williams? What would justice look like to you?" Amara had been waiting for this question. She'd thought about it carefully during the drive over. "I want Whitfield terminated immediately. I want a public statement from the bank acknowledging the discrimination and committing to change. I want mandatory unconscious bias training for every single employee, not just at this branch, but system-wide. I want the complaint process revised so that branch managers can't dismiss discriminations complaints. I want diverse hiring at all levels, especially management. And I want a community advisory board with real power to review policies and hold the bank accountable. She paused, then added quietly, "This isn't about revenge. It's about making sure what happened to me this morning doesn't happen to anyone else. It's about acknowledging that for years, this bank has allowed a culture of discrimination to flourish, and it's about doing the hard work to change that culture." Patricia nodded slowly. "You'll have all of that. And Dr. Williams, I want you to chair that community advisory board, if you're willing." "I'm willing," Amara said, "but I want real authority, not just a token position. I want the ability to review complaints, recommend policy changes, and, if necessary, recommend terminations." Done. At 3:30 p.m., Douglas Whitfield was escorted into the conference room by security. He looked confused but not particularly worried, just annoyed at being pulled away from his branch on a busy afternoon. He straightened his tie as he entered, preparing to explain whatever minor situation had prompted this summons. Then he saw Amara sitting at the board table, now dressed in her tailored suit, looking every inch the successful professional she was. His face went pale. "Mr. Whitfield," Patricia said coldly, "please sit down." Douglas sat, his eyes darting between Amara and the other faces around the table. What is this about?" "This is about the woman you had physically removed from your branch this morning," Patricia said. "The woman you called Sweetheart and told to go to a check-cashing place. The woman you accused of trespassing in her own bank." "I was following security protocols," Douglas said quickly. Defensively, "She didn't have proper identification. She looked suspicious." "She's Dr. Amara Williams," Patricia interrupted, her voice like ice. "She's a cardiothoracic surgeon at Northwestern Memorial. She's been a customer at your branch for 8 years. She holds multiple accounts totaling $38 million. And she sits on this board of directors, the board that oversees your employment." The color drained completely from Douglas's face. I didn't know." "That's the problem," Amara said, her voice quiet but carrying clearly through the silent room. "You didn't know because you didn't care to know. You looked at me and made assumptions based on my appearance, based on what I was wearing, based on the color of my skin. And you've been doing it for years, haven't you? To countless customers who didn't have my resources to fight back." "That's not true," Douglas protested, but his voice was weak. "I treat all customers the same." "We have 47 documented complaints that say otherwise," James Morrison cut in. "We have security footage showing you treating Dr. Williams with open contempt and aggression. We have testimony from your own staff describing a pattern of discriminatory behavior. Mr. Whitfield, your actions have exposed this bank to significant legal liability, destroyed customer trust, and violated basic human dignity. But, most importantly, they reveal a culture of bias that has been allowed to flourish unchecked." Douglas's mouth opened and closed. Sweat had begun to bead on his forehead. "I've been with this bank for 32 years. I've never had a formal complaint upheld." "Because you dismissed them yourself," Patricia said. "Because you were allowed to investigate yourself, to decide which complaints were legitimate. That ends now." She slid a document across the table. "Douglas Whitfield, your employment with Meridian Bank is terminated effective immediately, for cause. You'll be escorted from the building today. Your pension is under review pending legal consultation. And you should know that Dr. Williams' attorney has advised her she has grounds for a substantial lawsuit, which the bank will not contest." Douglas stared at the document, his hands trembling. "You can't. I was just doing my job." "Your job," Amara said, her voice hardening, "was to serve customers. All customers, not to play judge and jury based on your prejudices. Not to humiliate people who have every right to be in that building. Not to create an environment where discrimination was standard operating procedure. I'm not a racist," Douglas said desperately. I didn't mean." "Intent doesn't erase impact," Amara interrupted. "You didn't need to be consciously racist to perpetuate a racist system. You just needed to be unexamined, unquestioned, and unwilling to challenge your own assumptions. And now you're facing the consequences." Patricia stood. Security will escort you out, Mr. Whitfield. You have 30 minutes to clear your desk under supervision. Your access to all bank systems has been revoked. Do not attempt to contact current or former staff. Do not speak to the media. Your severance agreement includes an NDA, which you will sign today if you want any compensation at all. As security guards, not the same ones from that morning, Amara noted, flanked Douglas. He looked at Amara one more time. For a moment she saw something flicker in his eyes. Not quite understanding, not quite remorse, but perhaps the first glimmer of recognition that he'd been wrong, that his certainty had been built on sand. "Dr. Williams," he said quietly, I apologize." "Your apology is noted," Amara said, "but apologies don't undo harm. What matters now is what this institution does to prevent the next Douglas Whitfield from doing the same thing to the next exhausted traveler who doesn't fit his narrow definition of who belongs." The door closed behind him, leaving heavy silence in the conference room. Patricia sank back into her chair. "Dr. Williams, I know this doesn't fix what you experienced, but I want you to know that we're committed to real, substantial change. This isn't damage control. This is an institutional reckoning." "I'll believe it when I see it," Amara said frankly, "but I'm willing to do the work to make it happen." Over the next 3 months, Meridian Bank underwent a transformation that would become a case study in corporate accountability. The changes weren't easy, weren't always smooth, but they were real. The mandatory unconscious bias training rolled out system-wide. But unlike typical corporate checkbox exercises, this training was intensive, ongoing, and tied to performance reviews. Facilitators from civil rights organizations led difficult conversations about race, class, and privilege. Employees were required to examine their own biases, to share experiences of discrimination, to grapple with uncomfortable truths about how assumptions shape behavior. The complaint system was completely overhauled. Now, discrimination complaints went directly to a newly created Office of Equity and Inclusion, bypassing branch managers entirely. An independent hotline was established. Whistleblower protections were implemented for employees who reported discriminatory behavior. A diversity audit of management revealed what everyone already suspected. Leadership was overwhelmingly white, male, and from privileged backgrounds. Aggressive recruitment efforts targeted underrepresented communities. Within 6 months, 3 new branch managers were people of color, including Marcus, the security guard who'd been troubled by what he witnessed. The Community Advisory Board, chaired by Amara, met quarterly to review policies and complaints. It had real power, the ability to recommend policy changes, investigate incidents, and yes, recommend terminations if necessary. Board members included representatives from NAACPB, community organizers, small business owners from diverse neighborhoods, and customers who'd experienced discrimination. But perhaps most significantly, the bank launched a public acknowledgement of its failures. Patricia Chen held a press conference where she didn't minimize, didn't excuse, didn't hide behind corporate speak. She said plainly, "We allowed a culture of discrimination to flourish. We dismissed the experiences of customers of color. We prioritized comfort over justice. We failed. And we're committed to doing better." The backlash was immediate and predictable. Conservative media outlets accused the bank of wokeness and reverse racism. Some longtime customers closed their accounts in protest. But something else happened too. New customers flooded in, particularly from communities that had long felt unwelcome in traditional banking spaces. Trust, once shattered, began the slow process of rebuilding. 6 months after the incident, Amara stood before a packed auditorium at Northwestern Memorial Hospital, addressing the medical staff's quarterly diversity training. The hospital had invited her to share her experience and the institutional response that followed. "When I walked into Meridian Bank that morning," Amara began, her voice steady and clear, "I was exhausted, disheveled, and in need of simple banking services. I was also black, and in Douglas Whitfield's mind, those things made me someone who didn't belong, someone to be removed, someone beneath consideration." She paused, letting the words settle. "But here's the thing. What happened to me happens every day. In banks, yes, but also in hospitals, in stores, in restaurants, in every institution where assumptions about who belongs and who doesn't are baked into the culture. The difference is, I had resources to fight back. Most people don't. A hand raised. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a young resident. Dr. Williams, how do we make sure we're not making those same assumptions? How do we check ourselves? You start by understanding that we all have biases, Amara replied. All of us. The question isn't whether you have biases, it's whether you examine them, challenge them, and refuse to let them dictate how you treat people. It's uncomfortable work. It means confronting things about yourself you'd rather not see. But it's necessary. Another hand. What about institutional change? One person examining their biases is good, but how do you change entire systems? You hold people accountable, Amara said firmly. You create structures where discrimination has consequences. You don't let people investigate themselves. You listen when patients, customers, employees tell you they've experienced bias. You believe them, and you act on that belief. After the presentation, several staff members approached Amara privately, a nurse practitioner, nearly in tears. Thank you for speaking up. I've experienced similar things, but I didn't think anyone would care. A surgical resident. You've inspired me to file a complaint I've been too scared to make. A hospital administrator. We need to look at our own systems. Would you be willing to consult? Amara agreed to all of it, because that was the point, using her platform, her resources, her painful experience to create pathways for others who didn't have the same advantages. 9 months after the incident, Meridian Bank released its first quarterly diversity report. The numbers told a story of slow but real progress. Discrimination complaints down 73%. Customer satisfaction scores in minority communities up 45%. Diverse hiring up 61% across all positions. Retention of employees from underrepresented groups up 34%. New accounts opened by people of color up 89%, but Amara knew better than to declare victory. At the Community Advisory Board meeting, she reviewed the numbers with cautious optimism. This is progress, she said, real progress. But let's not forget, 9 months ago, I was dragged out of my own bank by security because a manager decided I didn't belong. The fact that we've made improvements doesn't erase the decades of harm that came before. This isn't the end of the work. It's barely the beginning. James Morrison nodded. Agreed, and we've had some resistance. 3 branch managers have resigned rather than participate in the bias training. Some longtime employees are struggling with the changes. There's been pushback. Good, Amara said, surprising him. If there's no resistance, it means we're not actually changing anything fundamental. We're disrupting a system that was working perfectly fine for some people at the expense of others. Of course, there's pushback. The question is whether we have the courage to push through it. Patricia Chen spoke up from the end of the table. Dr. Williams, I want to thank you again, not just for handling this with grace, but for refusing to let us off easy. You could have accepted a settlement and walked away. Instead, you forced us to confront systemic issues we'd been ignoring for years. I didn't do it for thanks, Amara said quietly. I did it because I was tired of being judged by my appearance, tired of having to prove I belong in spaces that should be open to everyone, tired of watching others experience the same humiliation over and over. Sometimes exhaustion becomes fuel, sometimes rage becomes clarity, and sometimes the best response to injustice is refusing to accept it. As the meeting concluded and board members filed out, Marcus approached Amara. He was wearing his new branch manager uniform now, having been promoted from security to management as part of the diversity initiative. Dr. Williams, he said, I just wanted to tell you, working at my branch now, it's different. Staff know they can speak up if they see discrimination. Customers from the neighborhood actually feel welcome. And I'm training my security guards that their job is to protect everyone, not to profile people based on someone else's biases. None of that would have happened if you hadn't fought back. Amara smiled, a genuine expression of warmth and hope. You were ready to fight back too, Marcus. You just needed someone to create the opening. That's what systemic change looks like. Not one hero, but lots of people making better choices when the system allows them to. 1 year to the day after the incident, Amara returned to the downtown Meridian Bank branch. Not because she needed to, she could have handled everything online or through other branches, but because returning mattered, because reclaiming that space mattered, because showing that she had every right to be there mattered. The lobby looked the same, still marble and chandeliers, still leather chairs and abstract art. But the atmosphere felt different. A young black woman sat behind the reception desk. A South Asian man worked as a teller. The portraits on the wall showing bank leadership had diversified. And prominently displayed near the entrance was a new plaque. Meridian Bank is committed to serving all customers with dignity and respect, regardless of race, ethnicity, gender, religion, age, disability, or socioeconomic status. We acknowledge past failures in living up to this commitment and pledge ongoing work toward equity and inclusion. If you experience discrimination, please contact our Office of Equity and Inclusion at... Amara stood before the plaque, reading it several times. It wasn't enough, words never were, but it was something, a public acknowledgement, a commitment to be held accountable against. Dr. Williams? A familiar voice. Amara turned to see Helen Martinez, her financial advisor, approaching with a warm smile. I didn't know you were coming in today. Let me get you set up in a private office. Actually, Amara said, I'll wait in line like everyone else. Helen's eyes widened with understanding. Of course. So Amara took a number and sat in the waiting area, in one of those same leather chairs where she'd sat exhausted and aching 1 year ago. Other customers waited around her, a diverse mix of people that felt more representative of Chicago itself than the exclusive enclave it had once been. No one stared, no one questioned her presence. She was simply another customer waiting her turn. When her number was called, Amara approached the teller window with a sense of quiet completion. Not closure. There would never be closure, not really. The memory of being grabbed, dragged, discarded still lived in her body. The exhaustion of constantly proving her humanity still weighed on her. The knowledge that bias and discrimination continued in countless forms across countless institutions still fueled her work. But this moment mattered, this reclamation of space, this refusal to be driven away, this insistence that she belonged, not because of her degrees or her bank balance or her position, but because she was human and this was a public space, and that should have been enough all along. As Amara completed her transaction and walked back through the lobby toward the exit, she caught sight of her reflection in the polished marble floor, not the exhausted, disheveled woman in a hoodie from a year ago, but also not someone transformed into something different, still herself, still tired some days, still fighting battles she shouldn't have to fight, but also still here, still standing, still refusing to accept that spaces could be closed to her. The glass doors slid open automatically as she approached. Beyond them, Chicago bustled with its usual rhythm, traffic and pedestrians, construction and commerce, millions of people navigating their own intersections of power and prejudice and possibility. Amara stepped through those doors into the bright afternoon, her head high, her shoulders straight, carrying the weight of what had happened, but also the hope of what had changed. Because that's what justice looked like in the end. Not the dramatic reveal, not the satisfying termination, not even the comprehensive reforms. Those were necessary, yes. But real justice was this: being able to walk through doors that had been closed, to occupy spaces that had been denied, to move through the world without constantly proving your right to exist. It was the quiet revolution of simply being, of simply belonging, of simply refusing to accept anything less than full human dignity. And if that meant fighting for it again and again, exhausting battle after exhausting battle, well, Amara Williams had never backed down from a difficult surgery. She certainly wasn't going to back down from the difficult work of building a more just world. The work continued. It always would. But today, on this anniversary of her humiliation and her resistance, Amara allowed herself a moment of hard-won satisfaction. She had demanded change. And change, however incomplete, however imperfect, had come. That was enough for today. Tomorrow, the work would begin again.